Alias returned to the church with more than questions. He carried food supplies and a newfound determination to understand Kai. The boy's silence lingered like a veil, frustrating yet compelling. Alias resolved to break through it not with force, but with patience. Kai sat on the steps again, watching the forest as though it might shift and reveal something unseen. His pale hair glinted in the dappled sunlight, and his posture was relaxed, yet alert. Alias approached slowly, setting down his bag before taking a seat nearby. "Good morning," Alias greeted, his tone light. As always, Kai didn't reply, but a brief glance in Alias's direction served as acknowledgement. It was enough. Pulling out a loaf of bread and a small jar of honey, Alias offered them to the boy. He slightly hesitated before accepting, his movements cautious. Alias watched Ashai tore a piece of bread, dipped it into the honey, and took a small bite. His expression softened slightly, a fleeting moment of peace that didn't go unnoticed. "I've been thinking," Alias began, leaning back on his elbows. "You're bound to this place, aren't you? The church, the barrier, the shadows. It all ties back to you somehow." The boy's hands stilled, but he didn't look up. Alias pressed on, careful not to sound accusatory. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "I just want to understand. Maybe even help if I can." For a moment, Alias thought he might respond. The boy's lips parted slightly, and his eyes met Alias's. But then he closed his mouth and returned to his meal, his silence as resolute as ever. Alias sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're not making this easy, you know that?" The boy's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. It was brief, but it gave Alias hope. Later that day, Alias explored the church interior while Kai lingered outside. The air inside was cool, tinged with the faint scent of damp stone and aged wood. Dust motes floated in the beams of light streaming through cracked stained glass windows. Alias's footsteps echoed softly as he moved from one pew to the next, taking in the faded murals and carved icons. One mural in particular caught his attention. It depicted a robed figure standing before a dark, swirling mass. The figure held a glowing object aloft, and the shadows seemed to recoil from its light. Beneath the image was an inscription in a language Alias didn't recognize. He traced the symbols with his fingers, their meaning just out of reach. A soft sound behind him made him turn. Kai stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He stepped inside, his presence immediately altering the atmosphere. It was as if the church itself responded to him, the air growing heavier, more charged. "Is this about you?" Alias asked, gesturing to the mural. "Were you the one holding back the shadows?" He approached slowly, his steps deliberate. He stopped beside Alias, gazing up at the mural. Then, to Alias's surprise, Kai reached out and pointed to the glowing object in the figure's hand. He tapped his chest, then pointed to himself. Alias's eyes widened. "It's you. You're the guardian." He nodded, the motion subtle but affirming. Alias's mind raced with questions, but he bit his tongue, unwilling to overwhelm the boy. Instead he said, "You're stronger than you look, but you don't have to carry this alone. I'll help however I can." The boy's gaze softened, and he offered Alias a faint, grateful smile. For the first time, Alias felt like he'd broken through a barrier, however small. That evening, the two sat together outside, the forest bathed in the warm hues of twilight. Alias watched as the boy traced patterns in the dirt with a stick, his movements thoughtful and precise. Curiosity got the better of him and he leaned closer. "What are you drawing?" he asked. Pausing, then pointed to himself and drew a symbol that looked like a spiral with radiating lines. He tapped it twice, then pointed to Alias and drew a different symbol, a circle encased in a square. Names? Alias guessed. Is that your name? Kai nodded, his expression brightening. Alias grinned, feeling a surge of accomplishment. Kai, he repeated, testing the name on his tongue. It suited him. Kai's eyes sparkled and he pointed to Alias, as if asking for his name in return. Alias chuckled and wrote his name in the dirt, beside the circle and square. Alias. That's me. Kai studied the symbols, then tapped them twice, mimicking the gesture he'd used for his own name. It felt like an affirmation, a silent agreement that they'd begun to understand each other. As the stars emerged one by one, Alias felt a sense of peace settle over him. The mysteries of the church and its silent guardian were far from solved. But for now, the bond forming between them was enough. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead.